Welcome to the deep dive. We take a stack of your sources, dig out the essential knowledge, and, well, give you the key insights without all the overload.
Yeah, and today we're getting into something that, really affects everyone at work and probably outside of work too.
How we give feedback, how we receive it, and we're focusing on this specific idea called radical candor.
That's it. We've got some great material from Kim Scott, who literally wrote the book on it, specifically a TEDx talk she gave and also a podcast interview transcript.
So our mission today is to really unpack that framework, understand why it's such a big deal, and pull out some, practical things you can actually start doing.
Okay, so let's dive right in. The core concept, radical candor, it's based on this, well, it looks simple, a 2x2 framework.
Right, like a grid, 4 boxes.
Exactly. So imagine one axis.
Right.
Let's say the vertical one is care, personally.
Okay.
This is about really seeing people as human beings, building relationships, showing empathy, actually caring about them,
Yeah.
not just their output.
Got it. And the other axis, the horizontal one.
That's challenge directly. So this is about being super clear, really candid with your feedback. Praise and criticism, no beating around the bush,
No sugarcoating.
none. So when you put those two together, high or low on each, you get these 4 different ways we tend to give feedback.
And the goal, the sweet spot, is when you're high on both, right? High care, personally, high challenge directly.
That's radical candor. Yep, that's where you want to be.
But, that's probably not where we always land. What happens if you challenge directly, you're blunt, but you kind of forget the care personally part?
Yeah, that quadrant is obnoxious aggression.
Okay. Sounds pleasant.
Yeah. It's basically being a jerk, right? Yeah. You're direct, but there's no empathy behind it. And the sources make a really important point here. It's not just nasty, it's actually ineffective.
How so?
Because when someone's being obnoxiously aggressive towards you, you shut down. You go into fight or flight. You literally can't process the feedback, even if it's clear.
Makes sense. You're just reacting.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe you feel bad later for being a jerk, so next time you might swing too far the other way and challenge less, which can lead somewhere even worse.
It is.
Manipulative insincerity. This is low care and low challenge. Total opposite of radical candor.
That sounds bad.
Oh, it's the worst. The most toxic, according to the sources, it's the backstabbing, the passive-aggressive comments, saying nice things to someone's face, but then
Yeah, talking behind their back. If obnoxious aggression is front stabbing.
this is definitely backstabbing.
Mhm.
But here's the really interesting thing the sources point out.
Okay.
While those two sound terrible, the place where most of us mess up, like maybe 90% of the mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
for 90% of people, it's actually in the other quadrant.
Where you do care personally.
Exactly. Because, most people are generally nice. They care about others.
Hmm.
But they fall down on the challenge directly axis. They're just too worried about hurting someone's feelings.
So they don't say the hard things.
Right. And that's called ruinous empathy.
Erroneous empathy. Huh. It sounds almost noble, like you're being too kind.
It does. But it's actually incredibly damaging.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this story in the sources. Oh, man, it's powerful. Really illustrates the pain of ruinous empathy. It's about this guy, Alex, or sometimes called Bob.
Okay, tell me about Alex, Bob.
So the author hired this person, Alex, and everyone loved him. He was smart, super charming, funny, just brought this great energy. There's this funny anecdote about like potty training analogies and candy.
Hmm.
He just knew how to lighten the mood. Genuinely liked by the whole team.
Sounds great, but there's always a but.
Yeah, the butt was,
Yeah.
his work was terrible. Just consistently bad, sloppy mistakes. And the manager, the author, saw it. They even saw like the shame in his eyes when he turned stuff in. He knew it wasn't good.
Oof. So what did the manager do?
Well, this is where the ruinous empathy comes crashing in.
Mhm.
Because the manager genuinely liked him, didn't want to hurt his feelings, didn't want that awkwardness. The feedback was just weak, watered down.
Like what?
Like, oh, Alex, you're so smart. This is a really great start. Maybe just, make it a little bit better.
Vague.
Useless, really.
Yeah. And the sources say there was maybe a bit of the other bad quadrant mixed in too. Manipulative insincerity.
Yeah, and this is really honest. There was fear, not just fear of upsetting Alex, but fear about the manager's own image. Like,
Yeah.
what if he gets upset? What if he cries in front of everyone? Will the team think I'm a jerk, a big know-it-all? So it was partly protecting Alex, but also protecting the manager's own comfort.
Wow. Okay, so what happened? This weak feedback, did it work?
Not at all. This dragged on for 10 months. 10 months. The work's never improved because the feedback wasn't landing. It wasn't clear how serious the problem was.
10 months is a long time.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And eventually the manager realized, uh-oh, my top performers are getting frustrated. They're fixing his mistakes, missing their own deadlines. The manager was going to lose good people if they didn't deal with Alex Bob.
So they had to fire him.
Had to fire him, which was, incredibly unfair to Alex Bob after all that time. He could have been finding a job he was actually good at. And unfair to the team, the business, everyone.
And what was his reaction in that final conversation?
This is the part that just hits you. He apparently pushed his chair back, looked the manager right in the eye, and just asked, "Why didn't you tell me?"
Oh, wow.
And then worse, "Why didn't anyone tell me? I thought you all cared about me."
Ugh, that's brutal.
Absolutely brutal. It just perfectly shows why ruinous empathy is so, well, ruinous. 'Cause
Yeah.
you think you're being kind by holding back, but you're actually setting them up for a much bigger fall later. It wasn't kind at all. It was a defining, awful moment for the author, a real never-again moment.
Okay, so that's the damage done by not being candid. Let's flip it. What about the power of actually getting radical candor? There's another story, right? The author's own experience at Google.
Yeah, this is a great counterpoint. So she's relatively new at Google, giving this big presentation to the founders, Sergey and Larry, and the CEO, Eric Schmidt.
High pressure?
Totally. And the scene sounds very Google. Like, one founder is on an elliptical during the meeting, wearing toe shoes and spandex.
Oh.
The CEO is multitasking, firing off emails like crazy.
Okay, paints a picture. And the presentation.
It went well. Her business unit was doing great. She felt pretty good walking out. But then her boss, Sheryl Sandberg, actually, asks her to walk back to her office.
Uh-oh. The walk of doom.
Maybe felt like it. So Cheryl starts with positive feedback, and the source notes it wasn't the dreaded shit sandwich, nice mean nice. It was genuine praise.
Okay, good start.
But then she gets to the point. You said a lot.
Yeah.
Were you aware of it?
And Kim Scott's reaction?
Pretty dismissive at first. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know I do that sometimes. Verbal tick, no big deal. Kind of brushed it off.
Happens.
So Cheryl persists. Offers to get her a speech coach. Kim brushes that off too, thinking it's not that important. And that's when Cheryl leans in to challenge directly. Hard.
What did she say?
She said something like, "Kim, when you say every third word, it makes you sound stupid."
Wow. Okay, that is direct.
Very direct.
Yeah.
And yeah, hearing it cold, you might think, whoa, obnoxious aggression.
Yeah.
But Kim Scott says it was actually the kindest thing Cheryl could have done.
Why? Because it worked.
Because it got through. Cheryl apparently knew Kim well enough to know that the softer feedback wasn't registering. Those blunt words, "sound stupid," finally broke through her defensiveness and made her realize, oh, this is a big deal. She used that analogy like walking around your whole career with spinach stuck in your teeth and nobody tells you.
Okay, I get that. But why did it land as kind and not just mean?
Because the foundation of care personally was already there. Rock solid. The source mentioned another story about the same manager, Cheryl. When Kim's dad got sick with cancer, Cheryl just told her, "Go home. Be with your family. We've got everything covered here."
Okay, so that built massive trust.
Huge trust. That kind of deep personal care is what allows the direct challenge to be heard constructively. It proves you have their back, you care about them as a person, not just a performer. That's the culture of care that can scale.
So she cared personally and challenged directly.
Exactly. She cared enough to have the uncomfortable conversation and kept pushing till the message got through. And the outcome? Kim says practicing and receiving radical candor leads to better relationships, better results, more success, and just being happier at work. That mutual respect, that's the baseline.
Okay, it sounds great. Powerful stuff. But let's be real, this sounds hard.
Yeah, it is. The sources are very clear. It's hard for everyone. Even Kim Scott admits she still struggles with it.
What makes it so tough?
Well, a big one is just that humans need to be liked, right? Especially if you're naturally a people pleaser. Giving tough feedback feels risky.
So how do you get past that?
The reframe offered is, your job isn't necessarily to be liked by everyone, it's to care about them. Shift your focus from, do they like me, to, am I genuinely helping this person? Making it others-focused can help manage that need for approval.
That's a helpful shift. Any other hurdles?
Yeah, the sources mentioned the likability competence bias, especially for women. This idea that if a woman is too direct, she risks being seen as unlikable or abrasive, which then unfairly makes people question her competence. So that can push women towards ruinous empathy, playing it safe.
Right, that's a real dynamic.
But ultimately, the argument is that practicing radical candor is actually a form of enlightened self-interest. Meaning, doing the hard, uncomfortable thing, now having that direct conversation saves you so much more time, energy, and pain down the road. It's like, a stitch in time saves 9. It takes emotional effort in the moment, sure, but it's way less work than cleaning up the mess from avoiding the issue for months, like in the Alex Bob story.
Okay, makes sense. Hard, but worth it. So, practically speaking, how do we start? Where do we begin actually doing this? The sources talk about an order of operations, right?
Yes, absolutely. And step one, the absolute first thing you need to do, according to Kim Scott, is solicit feedback. Ask for it first.
Before you start giving it out.
Exactly. You need to show you can take it, especially the critical stuff, before anyone will trust you enough to really hear your feedback. It builds that essential trust.
But how you ask is important, right? Just saying, hey, got any feedback for me? Probably doesn't work.
Usually not. People often clam up and say, nope, everything's fine. It feels put on the spot.
So what's a better way?
Well, first, it needs to sound authentic, like you, not some HR script. But the sources give some really good examples. Kim Scott's favorite is, what could I do or stop doing that would make it easier to work with me?
Ooh, I like that. It's concrete, actionable.
Yeah. Another one mentioned was from Krista Quarles. Tell me why I'm wrong,
Mm.
which is pretty direct, demands a response.
Ooh.
Or simpler things like, what's one thing I could be doing better? Or how could I help you be more successful? You can even put a time frame on it.
Oh.
What's one thing I could have done differently this week to support you better?
Okay, those are good prompts. So maybe the listener right now could think, what's my version of that question?
Exactly. Write it down. Think who you could ask this week. Maybe put it in your calendar. Make it real.
And this isn't just a one-off thing.
Definitely not. The advice is to do it regularly. If you have direct reports, maybe try for weekly, even just 5 minutes in your one-on-ones, and ask peers and your own boss regularly too. Maybe mix up the exact question so it doesn't feel robotic.
What if you ask and they just give you silence? Or say, nah, nothing.
Don't just accept it. The sources say, never let them off the hook entirely. Acknowledge it might feel awkward, but then pivot slightly. Ask them to just notice things for the next time you ask. Reinforce why it matters. Look, the single best thing you can do to help me improve is to tell me when I'm screwing up or could do something better.
Kind of like that Columbo one more thing approach mentioned, making it clear this is important to you.
Precisely. And yeah, recognize it will be uncomfortable for them, especially if you're the boss. That discomfort is part of the process. There's a great little tactic mentioned. If you get silence, just shut your mouth and count to 6 in your head.
6 seconds. That feels like forever in silence.
It does. But it gives them the space they need to overcome that initial hesitation. Don't fill the silence.
Okay, so you've asked, they're talking. What's next?
The absolute key is to listen to understand, not to respond. Your gut reaction, especially to criticism, is often defensiveness. Totally normal.
Yeah, fight that urge.
Fight it hard. The trick is to channel that energy into formulating genuine follow-up questions. Really try to get specific examples. Understand their perspective fully. There's a funny story about the author's daughter saying something that sounded harsh, but asking questions revealed a total misunderstanding. Don't assume, clarify.
Listen to understand. Got it. And then maybe the most important part.
Absolutely critical. You have to reward the candor. Seriously, that person just took a risk, especially if they report to you. If you don't show appreciation for that risk, you'll dry up your feedback well really fast.
How do you reward it? What does that look like?
Well, if you agree with the feedback, fix the problem. And don't just fix it quietly. Make it visible. Talk about it. Hey team, thanks to Sarah's feedback on the confusing meeting invites, we're changing the format. Show them their voice leads to action.
Make it tangible.
Yes. And then circle back, hey Sarah, is the new Avite format better? Did I fix it or overcorrect? The sources even say maybe aim to overcorrect slightly at first just to really show you heard them.
Okay, but what if you don't agree with the feedback?
Good question. Don't just brush it off with a fake thanks for the feedback. Everyone sees through that. Instead, try to find something in what they said, even just 5 or 10%, that you can genuinely agree with. Voice that part first.
Acknowledge the valid part.
Right. Then, for the parts you disagree with, don't argue on the spot. Just say something like, okay, I need to think more about that point. Can I get back to you? And then this is crucial. You actually follow up. Explain respectfully why you see it differently.
So disagreement is okay.
It's totally okay. The sources emphasize that the real danger isn't disagreement, it's unspoken disagreement. Having those respectful debates can actually build stronger relationships.
Okay, so that's soliciting feedback. What about giving it after we've shown we can take it?
Right, the sources touch on this too. Key reminder. Praise is arguably even more important than criticism, and both work best when delivered promptly, ideally in person or synchronously.
And there's a structure for it.
Yeah, a simple framework called CORE. Used to be corn. Apparently TikTok inspired a change. It stands for context set the scene. Where, when did this happen? Observation describes specifically what you saw or heard. Just the facts. Result, explain the impact of that observation. And X step, what should happen next? For praise, keep doing that. For criticism, here's what I'd suggest instead.
Context, observation, result, next step. Easy to remember.
And while you're giving it, you need to gauge how it's landing. Watch their reaction.
Read the room.
Totally. Are they looking sad? Angry? Are they just brushing it off? If they seem upset, sad, or mad, that's your cue to lean up on care personally. Check your tone, show empathy, say something like, did I not explain that well? How could I have said it better? Importantly, don't backpedal on the challenge directly part that just confuses things.
And if they're mad?
The advice is get curious, not furious. Ask questions to understand their anger. If they're just dismissing it, like Kim Scott did with the feedback initially,
Yeah.
that might be when you need to lean out more on challenge directly. Be blunter, clearer, like Sheryl Sandberg was. Make sure the message gets through.
Okay, this framework seems really useful for individual interactions. Let's zoom out a bit. How does this whole radical candor thing affect, like, the whole team culture? Or even bigger picture?
Yeah, great question. On a team level, the sources paint this picture of how things can degrade if you don't practice radical candor. Often, it starts with too much ruinous empathy. Everyone's nice,
Yeah.
but problems aren't addressed. Frustration builds under the surface.
Then what?
Then you might get bursts of obnoxious aggression as people snap. If that seems to work, if the jerks start winning, the culture can shift that way. And eventually, trust completely breaks down. And you end up in manipulative insincerity where everyone's just talking about each other, not to each other.
Yikes. So radical candor helps prevent that downward spiral.
Exactly. It keeps communication open and honest. And the sources even draw a parallel to, like, societal polarization.
How so?
This pattern of not talking to people we disagree with, just talking about them in our own echo chambers. The challenge is similar. We need to find ways to challenge unchallenged beliefs, even our own, and see common ground, talk to people across divides. Kim Scott even mentioned speaking at a company whose values she disagreed with as an attempt to practice this.
Interesting parallel. What about leaders who just seem stuck? Maybe they're always obnoxiously aggressive or they just avoid conflict entirely. How can you influence someone like that, someone maybe low on self-awareness?
That's tricky. The suggestion is to focus on the impact on results, and maybe even their own career. Show them how their style is affecting outcomes or how people perceive them. Often it helps to remind them that most people do care deep down. They might just not realize it's part of their job as a leader or how to show it effectively.
Like holding up a mirror, gently.
Yeah, and maybe sharing your own mistakes first can make it feel less accusatory, help them adopt more of a growth mindset. With the caveat, of course, that the sources say this probably doesn't work for, like, actual psychopaths who shouldn't be managing people anyway.
Right. And it's important to distinguish radical candor from just extreme feedback cultures, right? Like Bridgewater was mentioned.
Yes, very explicitly. The sources call out Bridgewater's system of public recorded criticism, DOTS, as an example of deep, dark, obnoxious aggression, not radical candor. Radical candor is about private guidance to help someone improve, not public shaming.
Good distinction. Okay, one more connection. That care personally access, it's not just about the tough feedback moments, is it?
Not at all. A huge part of showing you care personally, especially as a manager, is investing in someone's growth. Having real, meaningful career development conversations is highlighted as absolutely crucial.
What did those conversations look like?
The sources suggest a structure, often linked to Russ Laraway's work, involving maybe 3 key chats. First, understanding their life story, what motivates them, what experiences shape them. Second, exploring their future dreams. What does the absolute peak of their career look like? Maybe even multiple possibilities. And third, building a career action plan together. What skills do they need? What opportunities can help them move towards those dreams? How can their current job be tweaked?
So it's really about understanding the whole person and their trajectory.
Exactly. It shows you care about them beyond just the next deadline.
Okay, so pulling all this together from our deep dive into Kim Scott's work, radical candor really is about finding that balance, that intersection between genuinely caring personally and having the courage to challenge directly.
Right. And it's not about being perfect. You will slip into ruinous empathy sometimes, or maybe overshoot into obnoxious aggression. That ruinous empathy one especially is so common, wanting to be nice but causing bigger problems later.
But the key is the practice, isn't it? Starting with asking for feedback, really listening, rewarding that honesty, it builds the foundation.
It does. And the payoff, according to these sources, is huge. Stronger relationships, work that's actually more effective, healthier teams, and just, understanding each other better as human beings.
Takes courage, takes effort, week after week.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Emotional discipline, as the sources put it,
Yeah.
but incredibly worthwhile.
So let's leave you, the listener, with a thought to chew on. When you think about giving or getting feedback, which of those four quadrants, radical candor, obnoxious aggression, ruinous empathy, or manipulative insincerity, do you think you tend to fall into most often? And maybe more concretely, who is one person you could ask for feedback from this week using one of those questions we talked about? Give it a try.